This story is called The Impossible Christmas. One dark night, a few days before Christmas, Brendan said, "Acorn, can you go to any story, not just ones in books?" The little squirrel wrinkled his nose. "Well, yes, of course. Lots of stories never get written down, but they're still there in the story world. Why, was there somewhere unusual you wanted to go?" Brendan said, "Yes, because, look, I found this." He held up a tiny silver cube, not much bigger than his thumb, with a hole drilled through it. Acorn inspected it carefully. "What is it?" "Well, I've no idea, but Grandad said I could have it, and I thought it would make a nice seat for a fairy. She could fix it with a screw or something, and she could use it as a special place to sit, just for her." "Oh, that's a kind thought, Brendan. Do you have any particular fairy in mind?" "Yes, I think it would be a nice Christmas present for Fairy Willow. She lives in America with my cousin Rowan, you know." "Is that too far to go?" "No, of course not. I can take you anywhere in the story world in the twinkling of an eye." "Well, just like Galloper," Brendan said. Acorn's black eyes widened. "Oh, of course you know about Galloper." "That's right. He lives in England, but he can fly anywhere in the world just by thinking about it." Acorn nodded. "Yeah, I do it a different way, but it amounts to the same thing. So climb aboard, and we'll go and see what the story world looks like in California." It wasn't dark in California. In fact, it was bright sunshine. Brendan said, "That's because the sun hasn't gone to bed yet over here." Acorn agreed. "It takes 8 hours for the sun or the night to reach California from England, because it's almost the other side of the world." He looked around. "Anyway, now we're here, we have to find your fairy. Where should we look?" Brendan thought for a moment. "She'll probably be in the castle. Let's start there." They flew together to the fairy castle. It was very big, made of white stone with pink and yellow pointy roofs and long coloured flags flying from flagpoles. There was a small moat with a drawbridge, though it didn't have any water in it, and the entrance was guarded by 2 rather fierce-looking stone lions. Brendan pointed. "Look, there's a big brass door knocker that looks like a dragon's head." He knocked on the door, and it was opened by a fairy wearing a blue dress and apron, with a yellow top that had puffed sleeves. Her hair was tied up in a ribbon, and she wore sensible sandals on her feet. She was obviously dressed to do housework. She stood and looked up at Brendan, with her hands on her hips. "Well, there's unusual. Another human. We don't get many humans round here, look you. In fact, there's only one other ever comes here." Brendan nodded. "That will be Rowan. She's my cousin. And I'm Brendan. Are you one of the servants?" The little fairy laughed. "Goodness, there are no servants here, only friends. I'm Lizzie, and I'm the castle housekeeper, but only because I like housework and organising things. Can't stand to be idle, see. Got to be doing." Brendan said, "I'm pleased to meet you, Lizzie. We're looking for Fairy Willow. Do you know where she is?" "Oh, she's probably with the children in their adventure playground. I expect you'll find her over there." Lizzie pointed the way to where a group of fairy children were playing hide-and-seek, or hoop-jumping, or landing on one leg. Lucy and the unicorn was watching over them as usual, but Willow was nowhere to be seen. Brendan said, "Hello, Mr. Lucian." The unicorn stood and shook his mane. "Well, I never! A human boy." He thought for a moment. "Ah, you must be Miss Rowan's cousin. What are you doing so far from home?" "We've come to see Fairy Willow. Is she here?" Lucian frowned. "Well, I hadn't seen her for a while. She could be with the king. He has sore hands, you know." He thought again. "Or perhaps she's down in the woods collecting cobwebs and things for her medicine bag. Just a moment, I'll check." Lucian's blue horn began to glow, and he turned round twice, then came to rest, pointing at the castle. "Willow's there, but she's somewhere high up in one of the towers." Brendan said eagerly. "I bet she's with Mr. Magus. He lives in the highest room in the tallest tower." "He does indeed, Brendan, and I'm sure that both she and the wizard would love to meet you. Can you find your own way there? I would come with you, but I'm on guard at the moment, and I can't leave my post." "Oh, I think we can find our way. It's the tallest tower, and there's a long staircase that goes round and round till you get to the top." "Yes, that's right. And then you'll see a brown door. It will probably be closed, but just knock, and the wizard will let you in. If you get lost, ask Busy Lizzie. She's really helpful." Brendan nodded. "Yes, we've met her. Thank you, Lucian. We'll go right now." It was a long way up the stone stairs that went round and round as they climbed higher and higher, but when they reached the top, there was the brown door, just as Lucian had said. Brendan knocked politely. The door creaked open, and there stood Mr. Magus. It was just as Brendan had imagined him, with a starry cloak, a pointy hat, and long white beard. The wizard looked surprised. "I never... Look, Willow, another human. And who might you be, young man?"
"My name's Brendan. I'm Rowan's cousin, and I brought a Christmas present for Fairy Willow."
Mr. Magus frowned. "A Christmas present? Ah, yes, you humans often exchange those around this time of year." He turned and looked over his shoulder. "Come and look at this, Willow. Have you ever had a Christmas present before, my dear?" Brendan peered past Mr. Magus, and there stood Fairy Willow, in a green dress and a floppy white hat, with a big blue bag in her hand. She smiled and said, "I am very pleased to meet you, Brendan." He peeped over Brendan's shoulder. "I was going to ask how you got here all the way from England, but I see that Acorn must have brought you." Brendan said, "Do you know Acorn, Willow?" "Of course. Everyone in the story world knows Acorn. He's a very special squirrel, and you are lucky to have him as a friend." Acorn gave a little bow. "Thank you, Willow, but it wasn't my idea to come here. It was Brendan's. I think he has something for you." Brendan felt in his pocket, brought out the silver cube with a hole in the middle, and handed it to the little fairy. "I don't know what it is, really, but I thought you might like to make it into a seat, just for you." Willow's eyes opened wide. "It's beautiful. And look, I can fix it to the ground with a twig through that hole in the middle, so it won't wobble even if I stand on it to play statues. Oh, thank you very much, Brendan." Brendan remembered something Mr. Magus had said. "Is it only humans who give presents at Christmas, Mr. Magus? Don't fairies do it too?" "Not usually, no. We celebrate our midwinter festival, of course, but usually just with singing and dancing." He grinned. "And then perhaps a little bit of magic to liven things up. But we really have no need for special presents or special foods, not like humans do." Brendan looked disappointed. "So don't fairies have Christmas at all?" "No, my goodness, I didn't mean that," Mr. Magus puffed. "No, Father Christmas would be very cross if he thought we were telling you we didn't believe in him. But he's for the human world, you see. He is the spirit of Christmas, and at this time of year he spreads his magic across your world, so most people start wanting to do nice things for each other. His elves help as well, of course."
Brendan said, "I have a kindness elf toy in my house. He helps me to remember to be nice."
Mr. Magus nodded. Yes, the kindness elves are not much older than you, Master Brendan. It's often their first job, you know." Brendan said, "Their first job? You mean they get other jobs later on?" "Oh, goodness, yes. They grow up, you see, and much more slowly than humans, of course. Then they move on to something more challenging." He scratched his beard. "I knew a kindness elf called Lara once. Very pretty, very clever, she was. And when she started to grow, she went to be one of Santa's personal helpers. And now I think she's outgrown that too. Last I heard, she was learning to be a forest elf. She's still very clever and helpful, of course, but no one stays a kindness elf forever." "And are all the elves really busy right now?" Brendan asked. "Oh, my word, yes. Far too busy to celebrate Christmas themselves." So do they miss it all? Certainly not. The fairies always join in with human festivities. They hide among the decorations, or high up in the corners, or behind your curtains, though hardly anyone can see them. A few even perch at the top of Christmas trees, you know, and all the humans think they're just dolls. But if you listen very carefully, you might hear them singing or laughing. And then on Christmas Eve, when all human children are in bed, flower fairies all over the world climb to the tops of their highest trees and wave to Santa as he flies past. So we do enjoy the human Christmas, but we hold our own celebrations a few days earlier, on the longest night of the year. Humans used to call it the solstice. The solstice is a much more ancient celebration than Christmas, of course, and it gives Santa a chance to have some fun before he starts all his hard work on Christmas Eve. Brendan turned to Willow. I wish you could come to my Christmas Day, Willow. Willow looked sad. So do I, Master Brendan. All flower fairies come from England, you know, and I sometimes wish I could enjoy an English Christmas again. But I've promised Miss Rowan that I will be with her on Christmas Day, and I can't be in two places at once. Acorn held up a paw. Willow, there is a way you can do just that. Willow frowned. You mean celebrate Christmas with Master Brendan in England and with Miss Rowan in California, both at the same time? Oh, that's not possible, even for Mr. Magus. The wizard smiled. But I see what Acorn is thinking, my dear. Don't forget that Christmas in England comes 8 hours earlier than it does on the west coast of America. If Galloper is agreeable, you could spend Christmas morning with young Brendan and then skip back here before Miss Rowan wakes up and start all over again. 2 Christmas days in one. Brendan clapped his hands. Please, Willow. I'm having Christmas with Grandma and Grandad in Harrogate, and I can show you all round the old house. You can hide in the Christmas tree or up among the fairy lights, and you can watch everything. And maybe I can show you the pine woods and the playground at Valley Gardens and all the Christmas lights in town and everything. Please say you'll come. Willow looked at Acorn, and the little squirrel nodded. Sounds like a great idea, Willow. Spend Christmas with Brendan in the old country, and then back for another Christmas with Miss Rowan. I'm sure Galloper will help, but if he's too busy, I can do the transport for you. Mr. Magus smiled through his white beard. Then don't worry about the fairy children, my dear. I shall watch over them, as I always do at this time of year. Along with Lucian and Ogron, you can certainly take half a day off, and I really think you deserve it. And so it was all agreed. And that is how Willow became the first fairy ever to celebrate 2 wonderful Christmas mornings in just one day.